let me say a couple of things. So it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Professor Dattilo. He's an expert in many fields in geology. And today he's going to talk about some interesting problems with which emerge from his research, which can be tackled using machine learning methods. So it's a great pleasure to have him here. And I hope you guys are going to benefit from possible interaction with him even further.
I have a PowerPoint.
Please.
It's
Yeah.
it's hopeless.
Yeah.
So yeah, but the projector. And then the question is, are we sharing that? Yes, we probably will. So we are on a kind of a 10-minute slot time in this presentation. As far as, oh my God, come on, open.
Did they do any intervention?
Backup number 2. Yeah, right, whatever. Go away. Whatever, you're out. Okay. Yeah.
Do you need help with that?
No, I need to have files to work. Like that one.
Awesome.
All right, now we need to share screen.
I can see that screen okay.
You can see it from here. Would you like it shared directly? We can do
It'd be
that.
better for the recording if you could do that.
Yeah, that'll be
Beautiful.
right.
I see both. Good. All set.
Good. Okay. So I have no idea what that says.
Okay.
Okay. That should work fine.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So we don't need all that line. So what I'm here to do is talk about getting information out of shell sand that's been fossilized. And what I mean here is, like, say, if you go to the Bahamas, there's sand. And I don't just mean sand, I also mean shell gravel. Has everybody seen shell gravel? Right? You go to the beach, there's gravel made of shells. Or there's sand made of shells, by the way, right? That's one of my favorite pictures of me, fully clothed under the water. Anyway, so we have these different environments that we have, and they're all covered in the Bahamas, for example, with shell sand. And most of the sand in the Bahamas is made of seashells. And depending on the environment, this is this is pretty rough water, so you get these ripples on the bottom and finer sands. And this has coarser sands mixed with very fine muds that comes directly from these little plant-like things growing here. Little chips of them are everywhere. And so the sand reflects what's in the environment, right? It also doesn't just reflect what's in the environment, but the way it deposits reflects how much energy is in the environment. So there's all kinds of information, and I can't go through every little bit of information because that's an entire class. But I'm just trying to introduce the idea that there's a lot of information in shell sand. And after I do this, so this is a seagrass bed, for example, and all the little chippy things that make mineralized skeletons that live in and on and around and under the seagrass, I'm going to leave their little skeletons or shells in that sediment. And mind you, the rest of it's going to disappear if we turn it into fossils. Similarly with reefs, the reefs have all kinds of hard things that are growing on them, and some of the things aren't very well attached, so they fall off when they die, and they accumulate in the sediment around the reef. And so you have shell sand everywhere, and that shell sand differs according to its origin. And this just shows you how spotty these environments can be. So this is an aerial view from where some of those pictures were taken. And it just shows you that, you know, we have little patch reefs over here. We have this big, long, hard reef over here. We have patches of dark seagrass. We have all kinds of little things going on. And I do run a class here every other spring, theoretically, from now on, and I've run it before, as it's a fun little trip. And I have a little, so this just shows a fragment of shell sand. I have a little slide that I show everybody that showed up. It includes the actual shell sand, sliced versions where I put the shell sand, put it in plastic, sliced it really. So you can just look at that. Don't worry too much if you're fluffy. So hey, it's not that important. Just a display. Right. So when we deal with fossils, I'll show some funky pictures of students. This is in Texas, and we reconstruct these rocks to have originally been deposited in some kind of conditions like this. I got very angry when somebody found a perfect fossil sea urchin and all this stuff, but mostly it's just fragments that come up in layers. Here's an example of other layers. Now you see each of these layers is a layer of shell sand and other fragments. And between these hard layers are soft layers of just mud, right? So when we have a piece of shell sand, we would have, I'll pass this around. This here is, where is the camera? I can't remember. There's a rock right here that'll just pass around. And you can see that it's made of shells and shell sand. And then along with it, I'll just give you an example of something we sliced vertically through a much thicker rock. What that shell sand looks like. There we go. Enjoy.
All for me.
You can keep that too if you really want it. Okay, so this is an example of polished slabs.
So this
Like-
one is the one on the right.
This is not one of them. Like, I have hundreds of these.
But
I have hundreds of these, and that's the entire point, right? If I try to characterize these, how much time does it take a single student to work on it? I have lost many students to death by boredom, right? Death by tedium. And so my problem is student deaths are very high.
well, how many professors have you lost?
Yeah, right. I mean, we've all lost students to tedium, right? But I would like to reduce the tedium and increase the yield. I still want to kill students by tedium, but I want to get more out of that, right? So I'll just give you an example of two studies that have been done. I will show you the people who almost died doing them, and just give you an example of what kind of information we get out. So here, and these are sort of, this project, this is one of the boxes of slides in the project. What we do to make slides, we take one of these slabs, like we pass them around, that's cut vertically, cut a little square out of it or a little rectangle out of it. We glue it to a piece of glass. We flatten it first. It's really nice and smooth, and we flatten
You
it
do
out.
the operation, right?
Huh?
You do the operation of cutting and flattening and stuff like that.
Yeah, we do all kinds of mechanical things to the rock to get it ready to study, right? Then we cut off that excess slab. You can see, you can't see through that, right? That's just still like a couple millimeters thick. And then, you know, we thin it way down. Now, can I pass this around?
If it's,
Is anybody super klutzy? Don't drop it, hard to replace.
I'm not gonna touch it.
All right, here's what we're gonna do. Most of it. I'm gonna lay this up here and you can pick it up, lift it no more than a foot off the table, right? Because they are kind of a lot of work as well. I can make about 100 of them in 3 days if I need to, but, gentle. It's glass. All right, so you can see them, but these are scans of these things, right? So these are little 1 centimeter squares scanned out.
So one scan per any of those glasses, right?
Yeah, I scan the whole thing and I may pull more than 1 square out of it because this is like, I think it's either 2 centimeters across or
So
1.
you scan all of them, but you save just one of the, okay.
I scan all of them, I save everything, but when I do an analysis, I try to standardize the area. And it might be 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters, or it's whatever I want to do for that project. Every project's different, but the main idea is that there's a lot of complexity in these pictures, and I'm extracting certain kind of ideas or concepts out of it, right? Or things out, because I've been doing this, me and maybe 30 other people in the world who can stand this work, which is awful, right? Extract information, and I'll just show you some of the information we extract, right?
So I have a question about the GM thing, right?
Yeah.
There are some circles, well, in also others, right? But there are some circles there. How do, at least some shapes which look circular, how do those circular shapes emerge?
How do they match?
Emerge,
How are they formed?
yes.
All right. So what are these things? These are snails. Now, do you recognize snails from these?
Yeah. From there?
No, you don't. All right, so have you ever gone along the road and seen a dead animal? All right. And let's say 30 cars run over the dead animal. Now, how good are you at recognizing what the species of dead animal is? If it doesn't smell bad. If it smells bad, it's a skunk, right? Otherwise, is it a raccoon? Right? That's flattened wildlife. These are snails. How do I know they're snails? Because I know what snails look like when they're sliced. How long does it take me to get a student to understand that those are snails? Too much time, right? But those are snails, trust me. It's about sectioning through a snail, picking a plane, slicing through a snail in various angles. And these shapes are very characteristic. And if I could probably train a machine faster by just saying, these are all snails, right? But I don't understand it. Don't take my word for it. That's your problem. I'm hoping.
So I'll tell you why I asked this question. Right?
Yes.
So what I mean, so there is something called standard map. So standard map is a prototype of a dynamical system which goes from organized motion to chaotic one, just by changing the parameter.
Right.
The only thing that happens is that there are circles which deform, and at certain point deform so much that just very few of them remain, and all the other part of the base space is chaotic. and they don't look completely different from that, but they look different from that from certain perspective because there is some, but if you look at those.
So you're saying you have an idea how to approach
just-
the problem?
Well, this one is not an idea on approach the problem. This one is similarity on the pictures. The idea to
Right.
approach the problem is I'll mention it at the end. But that's
Okay.
one similarity. So, but that depends. So the reason for the ask that is that if I know how those are formed, let's say there is one parameter which changes.
Right.
And because of that, things become circular instead of something else. Then there is a similarity also with the other aspects.
Right. So in this case, we're looking at some different things that are found in the rocks. But what we're concentrating on in this case is fine grains versus big grains, right? And the proportion of fine grains, big grains, and a third thing, which is nothing. Well, nothing is not nothing. It fills with crystals when there's nothing, right? So you think of a pile of shells. If there's nothing to infiltrate between the shells and then just solidify in the ground, what will happen is crystals will form between them and glue them together. We call that cement because it glues things together, right? If, on the other hand, they're in a muddy environment and there's a bunch of shells, like here and here, right? You see there's a lot of mud and not very many crystals. The mud is the gray material. So the three things that we're recognizing in these pictures are how much mud, how much shells, and how much crystals, how much nothing. Or it really is something because there are people who spend their entire lives studying the form of the crystals, right? Which also gives us information. In other words, this is a vast field and any one thing that could be automated would have. Right? So I don't mean for everything to be solved. Like just solving a few problems would be interesting because the other thing we have here is fragmentation. These are whole snails. These are whole. Yes.
What is the YUM, WP, PWG,
Okay, so those probably don't matter to you,
Okay,
but these are terminologies from the classic study of these kinds of rocks.
okay. So,
The terminologies are mudstone, wacky stone. These don't matter to you.
Okay.
It would take me forever to explain. But they are related to the amount of mud and the amount of crystals and the amount of shells.
Probably the only thing which I would say is of interest to someone which has, the machine learning component is how the six things are related. Namely, is MW related to, so is PW related to PW?
Actually, let me just skip all these, which show a succession. I mean, we'll just show pictures here, okay? So there's all mud. There's some mud and lots of crystals and lots of sand too. There's not much mud, but some mud. And there is a lot of crystals. There's almost all crystals and little bits, right? And then this is altered little bits. The brown things are phosphate. So this particular study was all about phosphate, which isn't a broken shell. It's something that comes in later, right?
Is there a scale of importance on the things that you see in the like?
The scale of importance is determined by the study. So we can just decide. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So in this case, for this particular study, I was looking at, should have reversed this, but I took the AI's suggestion of arrangement and didn't think too well, right? The PowerPoint AI is going like, I think this looks good. Really, we want to go from right to left here. And in this case, we have increasing grains until the grains are touching each other. So that's the first classification, mud, wacky. Then pack stone is when the grains touch each other, but now there's still mud. And then after that, the mud starts to wash out, and this is just a pattern that is seen, right?
So there is some sort of
hierarchy.
Parameters, some set of parameters that move them. We don't know how it works, but there are some set of parameters which you move them and then you go from one class to the other.
Exactly. Right. So there are continuous parameters here, you see?
Yeah.
It's continuous variation, and we've just drawn lines. We do not have to draw lines to study it. We could just get pure numbers of like percent mud, percent shell, percent void, right?
Okay, and you have been doing this manually, like researchers have been.
Uh-huh. In fact, this one, the real good way to do this is to point count. Put a bunch of points over the picture, the square, and the mud, mud, cement, shell, mud, 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 cement, cement, shell, shell, shell. Pretty soon the student is dead. Right?
Yeah, because they started the study in 1937.
Yeah, we started this in 1937. But so to avoid this, I got the students to just estimate. I made these and said, estimate off these pictures. Which one is it? So I just gave them classes, right? What happened, of course, is when it went to peer review, Zubovic is on this, by the way. She helped me with the statistic. When it went to peer review, somebody said, you can't estimate it, that's bullshit. Right?
So what was the comment?
You can't estimate. That's wrong. They want you to count. It'll throw you off. I just said, hey, sorry, we're estimating. That's how I got through that peer review. I can't kill another student on this project, right?
And then the journal didn't want to have any.
I had 3 students who almost died. Yes.
The journal at that point didn't want to have any responsibility of that.
Yeah, that's right. And that's how I got the paper published. Here we have fragmentation. So this is another way to look at the same data, right? You see that? So how fragmented are the shells? Now, our proposal was fragmentation and cement content are correlated. That it's the same line. They all vary, they co-vary, right? But we had to count all this stuff. Well, no, we asked, screw the counting. We estimated it all. And then down here, we counted these little brown grains because we also hypothesized that the brown grains were correlated with the other two.
I just disagree with the referee because
With the what?
with the referee which told you that you have to count.
Yeah.
Because the material is in some sense is homogeneous, but in another sense each single liter square looks like all the others. So when you estimate the count, I've estimated the mistake in how you estimated that, but if you estimated the count in a small area of that, that's good.
Yeah, and this is my argument, is that other people do it, it's been calibrated, right? So here was counted though, and estimated. I had them estimated and counted, and that's where we did some QA, right? Some quality assurance, quality control, is your estimate like?
But you could have done it for the first 2 as well, maybe on a smaller sample size.
Oh, God, I guess.
I mean, you could have just taken you and
I could have.
down and then said, how do you compare to?
Now this is just a few examples of where we place them. This is, lithology is the one on top with L1 through L6, right? The one in the middle is F0 through F5. F0 is, well, there's nothing to observe, right? F5 is thrashed, right? Completely comminuted, completely ground to bits, right? And so down on the bottom here, we have whole fossils. Up on the top, we have ground up fossils, just sand, shells, let's just ground up shells. And what we noticed is, what we were testing was, is this diagonal really the strongest position, right? But then it got really fancy. Well, this is the student who died right here. She never really smiled, but she noticed that I was taking a picture, so she pretended.
There was a monetary exchange.
Yes, and this is her counts of the brown dots that were in here, and you see that there's a stratigraphic pattern, and we were able to do a three-dimensional chi-squared. I figured it out how to do it in Florida. I sent it to Yvonne, and she said, yeah, that's right. Right, how to predict.
When she was close to that or before?
Well, all the data was in. I was trying to get the paper done, right? And so getting the paper done, the student had presented several times, had gotten her job tied to a microscope the rest of her life because of this experience.
The only survival was Ivana.
Yeah.
And you.
Yeah, then I have to take over. And so what it showed is these red marks are where things are significantly higher than expected, right, by chi-squared. But we needed to get the data first, right? So we can do statistics on data. If we don't have data, we can't do statistics. Getting the data requires killing students. And here is just showing conceptually how what we think is called condensation, how long the shells have been sitting on the sea floor, right? The longer they sit there, the more chance there's for mud to wash away, the more chance for shells to break, the more chance for chemical reactions to occur to make the little brown bits, right? And we just give an example there. And so that's these two are the crowning figures of this. Started on another project, killed this student in the process. And he counted these right here, right? So these are the counts of the brown things. This is gamma rays. Don't worry about that. This is also, he identified species or critters, right? What kind of shell is it?
What's the vertical axis here?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What is the vertical axis? Like
Right. So let's just do that. See, this is where I have to be corrected because I don't understand what people know, right? But they don't know. So you see right here, there is a pile of rocks, and on top of it is a parking garage.
So
Right.
it's a proxy for the age.
So this vertical thing is a distance. These are meters, right? These are meters from the bottom to the top, so the same direction as if you just went all the way up a strip. And then these represent the bed. So the red ones are, we'd already sort of determined they got a lot of crystals. Those are red. And those are probably the big beds in there, right? So these two should match. I didn't match it up entirely. Similarly here, we can have different styles of this, but this is the same kind of diagram drawn by a different person in the 1960s and et cetera. Does that make sense?
Beautiful, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we had a bunch of these dots are the samples. Most of which are associated with a count, right? So that's how many samples we have from there. That project hasn't been published yet because the student just died. Now, another thing was I got a guy from a petroleum company in Pittsburgh. We were having discussions about beds of limestone that are made of cells, right? Shell beds. And what they were looking at is black muds from which you get petroleum. Now, petroleum comes by what people on the internet say, with all caps going, it's a conspiracy. Petroleum clearly comes from dead things, right? Mostly microscopic dead things. And those microscopic dead things accumulate where there's no oxygen over, when it's all buried. Several processes occur to kind of create petroleum. The black material is sweet. They love the black stuff. The white stuff, they were wondering, are those are shells. Those are little layers of shells. This is a core. To show you. Here is a piece of core, right? So it's drilled vertically, right? This was split in half. This is white. This is all shell. This is black. It's mostly fetid muds, stinky muds, right, that have turned into rock. And what they did is they just cut right down the middle. And then I said, well, cut me some thin sections, right? This box literally right here. So this content, now these, don't even lift them. All right. I stole them basically because the company got out of that business, fired a bunch of people, and I had this box of microscope slides. We don't talk about that, right? So they're unreplaceable. So like in an absolute way. But at any rate, this is just, anybody want to pass a core around?
Well, how costly is that?
Nothing.
You know, then, okay.
Here, your turn.
Who wants to touch the rest?
You can see a shell is on the end of, there's a shell on the end. It's kind of cool. All right. So we took just various thin sections from various parts of the core. You notice that this has nothing, and it's also the highest total organic carbon. This is where the sweet spot is. This is where the oil's coming from, right? And so I just went through it. And so first thing is, we want to know if the shells were transported. We know the burrows were not, right? Burrows, tracks, and trails. If the waves come up, they wash away, right? So one of the things we can also do is look at that. How many burrows do you see? The answer is 0, by the way. 0. There's nothing going on here. Now you can see a little bit of disruption. There's some breakage in these things. That's probably from critters crawling around under the mud. Now you can see more. You see it's just this patchiness. It's not all vertical. It's not all horizontal. You also see some little shells. Those are ostracods, by the way. And now you see more disruption. Check that out.
So what is the difference between this program?
No burrows. Very few burrows. Some burrows. Quite a few burrows. Lots of burrows. I do it by the texture.
But you take the pictures at different,
These are different places. Different places in the core. Right? All right. Totally messed up. Well, not totally. You can still see that there are burrows. More messed up, right? And so basically rank those 0, 1 through 6. 0 through 6 right here. No burrows. Tons of burrows. And what you notice is this is a dead zone where there's almost 0 burrowing. And the burrowing is higher below and above, right? What's that show? Of course, this high organic carbon is where there was nothing that could eat it because the environment was awful, right? The seafloor was like, oh my God, I can't even breathe here. The worms die. Everything here is dead. That's where you get oil. Oil is from death. So now shells can be transported. So let's look. This is a bunch of species that are recognized. So one of the other things is recognizing different forms and identifying what they are. So this form here is ostracods, circled that, estimated, not counted, the abundance, etc. This is a cool spiny trilobite, can recognize this. And again, the other people in the oil industry, I remember sitting over a core of this very thing later, and they were looking at of a similar rock. They were looking at it, and as I came up behind them, they said, "And he can identify fossils from vent sections." And I come up to them. It's not that hard. It was fun. At any rate, the problem is, though, it's not that hard, but there's like 30 of us left, right? So the other thing is, let's save it a little bit. Can somebody help me with this? Right. There's a different kind of trilobite. There's another one. There's one. So what I'm just showing is what it looks like, what it is. I didn't have what it is. I know what that is, but okay, pictures is a problem. These things correspond to this kind of critter. This thing right here, you see the holes there. This is cut through. There's the holes, etc. And if we put it all together, I can count the number of species. This is just how many different species show up in this sample. That makes this curve. I can count the evenness of distribution of species. That's Shannon's index or Shannon's H. Google it. It's simple. You just take a collection. Yeah. And then I use that bioturbation, which is the burrowing, and they all match, right? Now, the real point here is, it was really useful for the guy doing it because he understood his rocks better. Able to say, okay, so that explains that the shells are meaningful. If you pay attention to the shells, that helps guide you a little bit. Yes? Yes. Okay. This means no. So, okay. And this is just what this shows is basically thickness of shell beds. And you notice that in the zone where you get a lot of organic matter, the shell beds are almost gone, right? So that's basically it. I'm just my presentation of problem, which is multifaceted, which a number of different approaches that you could solve any one of these problems, right? It would be useful. You could solve all of them, and I don't believe that's possible for anybody to do very quickly, but maybe you're more magic than I am. But this is just a pile, not including these two boxes that I just took a picture. It's piled up on that thing at home that I need.
Okay, so in a nutshell, like I can summarize it as like you have images and like you're talking about the shells images. Then there are some labels like gallium or FS or so on.
Yeah.
And so far you have been doing this manually.
Right.
So you just want those images which are not labeled 8, so you want them to be labeled.
I wouldn't mind if you took the ones I already labeled or with AI as well. We could use them for training. I don't know.
Well, exactly. That's perfectly.
But, a few of those boxes, some of them have been labeled with various things. But we have to choose what we label because we don't have infinite time as students die today. And we have to pick and choose. We didn't do everything we could do because many of these boxes are basically a system. And if we have the whole system, not just in a spot, across many places, then this can be applied more broadly because there's plenty of places this could be applied, but people would rather pay $20 a specimen to run through a mass spectrometer, find out isotopes, and hire somebody at hundreds of dollars each to go through and count them because of the 30 hours that are left, right? So there are people who are expert, for example, in doing this for roads, for pieces of rock that go into the road, and about $1,000 per cent. It's not something you're going to just throw. What is it per box? Oh, 100 per box. I'm not going to throw a whole box of them at that person because $1,000 is too much. And again, it's useful generally for asphalts, concretes, anything. Get started somewhere. I'm like founding my oil, but it could be applied broadly. Sorry, go on.
So how many images do you have that are currently labeled and how many images are there that you want to label?
I have maybe a couple of hundred that are labeled in some way.
Okay, a couple of hundreds, okay.
Guys, and all of them missing some potential analysis. None of them are. One does not just throw everything. really have an intent, but or AI, and I can soon over it. So what I've also sort of started to do is just isolate elements as ones that have background that you. It's a picture without anything else. But yeah, painting. So I have some paintings of things that I just cut exactly what I wanted out to label those as well. I'm not going to go do a lot of this. Somebody tells me what's. So what I would do is I would do that labeling. Somebody could see if they could teach something automatically. I would just provide.
You said you have a couple of hundred that are labeled.
In some way.
In some way, okay.
Right.
How many of them that are perfectly labeled?
There's no perfect way.
Okay,
I would not do one.
okay.
I repeat.
So what he has in practice is on those images, he has some parts which are circle.
Yeah.
And for the majority of the image is not complete circle. Now those which are circled, you have just, okay, this is this, that is
Right.
that. Those are 200 images. And, but they are fully labeled, a single image, meaning.
Yeah,
that
so
was-
I mean,
Yeah,
I can tell you right now, this is mostly salmonellas. Picked it up at random, it's mostly salmonellas. That's because the flakes, the little corn flakes, see the corn flakes? The little flakes.
Yeah.
In-
so, but,
From here, but if I went out and
so,
magnified it, maybe I would change my mind. But that's what I did for the study of this material. Yeah, right? Mostly dominants, a few trilobite. This is how I did.
myself, for now, I wouldn't worry much about the labels. I would just worry about segmenting the image.
Exactly.
Because
I would give you an image, I'd give you a bunch of images and see what you do with them. What?
now the difficulty for the segmenting the images, because labeling them, you're just gonna take a certain amount of time. You need to train someone to get the labeling right.
Right.
And as you said, it's a complicated thing. Because
Right.
you don't get people trained to label stuff, right?
Right.
The other thing is that, so one of the difficulties in these images is that, let's say the most standard algorithm for image, recognition, something like that, you use something called convolutional neural networks. Now that one, the simplest possible case at least, so let me start with that. So how does that work? That works by averaging similar things, usually spatially nearby things. If you do that here, that's the thing, this is things up.
Right.
Because if you average much, then if you average on a too large thing, then it just mixed too many different stuff.
Right.
While if you average too close by, then you are in another approach that it's kind of something called overfitting or something like that. So that's one of the difficulties. But my position on this is that the image is similar to those pathology things that.
Yeah, they look a lot like pathology
And
because,
so one has to deep
yeah,
from those techniques.
Yeah.
So, starting from segmentation, that's it.
Here we can, I think, if we view that first 6 images in a row, there were like with increased quantity or something. So I think if we use just rather than image segmentation, if we just use an image classifier and just classify the things, because that is what they are expecting.
But I think that it doesn't want only the single images. It wants to know more parts of it, what they are there. Is that correct, Dan?
so the thing
Well,
is,
maybe the first
that
step
is,
fine.
that,
First
if
step.
that were a first pass, I would be perfectly happy with it,
Yeah, that is doable.
right? Because it would,
Rapidly.
we'd be able to rapidly, I could make a bunch more images and we could test it,
If-
and then we could compare our eyeball with what the thing comes up
If
with.
they interested the distinguishing between those images, just those 6, 7, as we said, it's not complicated. That's
Right,
doable.
right. And then the next,
Also labeling them, it's not complicated because even if there are 2,000 of those, labeling them,
that's not too much work.
it's not
Right.
much, just labeling
Because
the
it's
image.
not quantitative to start with. So the question is, if we started there, we could start maybe to get a sense of what we're doing. Like, I don't wanna throw everything at some, I don't think that that would be useful, but I don't know, it's your field. I just know that there are different ways of looking at these. And that does include just eyeballing it and saying, that's this, this is this, this is this, this is this, as a whole. But then there are parts, if we wanted to, we could get into more detail, and that's where that last project, right? So the first project was more this, a broad look at the pictures, and then the second project was a very detailed look at the components inside of the pictures. Those are kind of two different things, right?
Well,
Or,
first of the two that you mentioned is not super hard.
yeah,
It might even be that you just randomly put images in a,
right,
what the algorithm which is already available on TensorFlow, whatever,
yeah.
might be just work.
And I suspect that counting brown things wouldn't be hard either.
We can even count the number of rice grains from the image using, the image quality should be worth it, and
Yeah,
we should have enough data.
and I could always get these scans in higher resolution if that's needed, but right now they're in 3,200 dots per inch, original size, right?
But Professor, with like 6 images, like, we won't have all the defined classes, right, Rishikesh?
I could give you
Like,
maybe 50 or so that have been classified in this way.
no, whatever the classes currently are, like, one thing we can assure you that, like, for example, if you have 100 images, now they might not be perfectly labeled, like some of them might have multi-labels associated with them.
Right, because the student was getting tired,
Yeah,
right?
so the another 100 images that you have, which are not labeled at all.
Right,
So what we can assure you is that they will be labeled just like the first 100.
The initial, which were like second,
Yeah.
it would be similar.
Exactly.
right.
But myself, if you have to label simply the images, if you have to label the images, if they are 2,000, like, how long does it take to label one image? Like 10 seconds, I don't know. 2,000 times 10 seconds, 200,
Yeah,
20,000
yeah, that's a lot.
20,000 seconds.
Exactly,
Not a long time.
right. So it's still not a long time, but it's a start on the process, right?
If it's to then label the things inside each image, then whatever. But if you labeling 2,000 images,
Yeah. Well, clearly, yeah, so it just depends on how much time I have to take to do it. Fragmentation is a little harder, for example, than mud, right?
Fragmentation takes a lot of data, but image
Oh.
classification won't
We're
take.
using two different words, right?
Okay.
Fragmentation for me is how fragmented the shells are. Segmentation and fragmentation for you seems like that's a different concept, yes?
Fragmentation is like outlining what you're.
Right, exactly. And that would be the most interesting, and that would be the hardest to do by giving actual numbers to mud, shells, first step being how much mud, how much shell, how much cement. And then the next step after that would be, what is the shell? What kind of shell is it? And that gets very complicated because snails, you notice, right? And you teach something to say that's the snail.
Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
that seems like the highest end to me,
Okay.
but, if we can do it,
That's
great.
possible, right?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, let's start with the simplest problem, that
Yes.
is the image classification.
Yeah.
And then we can give you a small demo or prototype kind.
Right.
So once you get, assurance that, okay, this method works,
Thank you.
then you can further invest efforts in like maybe labeling them. So that's what we are saying.
Yeah. I can do that.
Okay, and this, I just have this one question in mind, like random, because that's how I look at things, but this is not related to the research work, but I'm just curious, like what are the financial, means if we launch such type of system as a product in the market.
For the product.
Or as a product, like for example.
Right. Obviously, for the future, like the question is, I see it in two ways, right? One, if you can tackle this problem, you can go into medical because it's very similar, right?
Okay,
Two, it is a petroleum research thing. It's a, basically recognition of complex things in a picture. I think it's just broadly applicable within my field. It would be just useful and it's publishable. It's very publishable.
Yes.
Even if you're competing with a lot of people elsewhere, this will get published, right? And so I'm not
You stole precious material from.
Yeah, right. I might not be allowed to use,
It's okay, we have.
right? We are talking, thank you, Ron.
Good.
Thank you.
So, wait. So let's thank Professor Dattilo for the great talk. Okay.
All right, does that help? If that helps
Yeah.
to get us started,
It's,
also I'm available for any kind of, future clarification.
yeah, good. That's good. So remember that you a time ago you had a student which was